Academic Standard Philosophy course. Hi everyone! Are we going back to Eastern thought again? However, we have already learned Buddhism and Confucianism, haven't we?
As we saw before, the original Buddhism and Confucianism were utterly different from what we know today.
Aha! That means they've been switched at some point.
Indian Buddhism had already been introduced to China, in the Western Han era, through the Silk Roads, both the inland and maritime routes. Still, people understood it, in analogy with Taoism or Confucianism. However, in the 2nd century of the Eastern Han era, when the foreign Kushan Empire expanded, monks from Central Asia and India fled to China, and translated the sutras into Chinese, and gradually their correct understanding of Buddhism became clear.
Anyway, like Taoism and Confucianism, Buddhism was also not the worship of an absolute God, so they would have an affinity.
However, at that time, China had lost its unified dynasty since 220, and was in turmoil. Therefore, early Chinese Buddhist temples were bases for refugees from Central Asia and India, rather than study places, so they were built like fortresses with armed monks, to protect against Chinese civil unrest. After the Kushan Empire was conquered by the Sasanian Empire of Persia in 375, the refugees increased drastically, and they brought their mass Buddhisms, including Maitreyanism and Pure Landism, along with their sutras and Buddha statues, to China. Chaos had already been brewing for hundreds of years, giving rise to eschatology, or the feeling of the end of the world, which quickly spread the mass Buddhisms among ordinary people.
At the same time, a sense of doomsday was widespread also in Europe by the massive immigration of the Germanics.
Monk Kumarajiva, of the oasis city of Kuchia, in the western desert basin, was the son of a monk from Casimir, the upper reaches of the Ganges, and he had also studied in Casimir. In 384, the former Qin dynasty of the northern half of China, invaded the western desert basin, arrested him, and sent him to the capital city, Chang'an. He translated there a vast amount of Buddhist scriptures, in a concise and paraphrased way. In particular, his Lotus Sutra of Vairochanism to save all people, had a significant impact on China.
When politics became stable, Vairochanism with worldly benefits would be more attractive than the Maitreyanism or Pure Landism, in the same mass Buddhisms.
Monk Buddhabhadra, a true descendant of the Siddhartha family, also came from India to Chang'an, where he befriended Kumarajiva. He translated the Garland Sutra, but his authentic Indian-style meditation annoyed Kumarajiva's disciples, and he was expelled to the south.
I wonder whether Kumarajiva's translation was accurate, although easy to understand. Perhaps his Chinese disciples had learned Buddhism only from books, and did not know the practical meditation method.
Fearing these mass Buddhisms would spark popular uprisings, emperors of countries suppressed them. However, although the Northern Wei dynasty in the northern half of China had Taoism as its state religion, Emperor Wenchang tolerated mass Buddhisms, to unite the country, and to accept immigrants from Central Asia, who fled from the Hephthalites. Emperor Wu of Liang in the southern half of China was fascinated by Pure Landism, and supported its propagation, so it spread to Baekje on the Korean peninsula, and even to Japan. However, they often worshipped only the divine monk Guanyin, who serves as Amitabha's messenger, and transforms into everything to help people.
They also prefer salvation in this life, rather than in the afterlife.
At that time, Persian Bodhidharma came from South India, and met Emperor Wu at Nanjing, in 520. Although Emperor Wu boasted about his magnificent temples of over 500, and passionate monks of over 100,000 in his empire, Bodhidharma criticized him for not understanding Buddhist teachings, and left for the Shaolin Temple in the northern mountains inland.
Pure Landism was of the northern Kushan Empire. In addition, it was of the common mass Buddhisms, so Bodhidharma would dislike it. On the other hand, as the Shaolin Temple is famous for its martial arts, it was a base for immigrants from Karbra of southern India, where Bodhidharma had also stayed before.
Bodhidharma criticized existing Chinese monks, who only read ever-increasing sutras, and did not master Siddhartha's teachings. In contrast to mass Buddhisms of Central Asia and even senior Buddhisms of India, he established the new practical Buddhism, Zen, at the Shaolin Temple. He proposed 4 principles for Buddhist training, without a text. Buddhism is everywhere. When piercing your mind, the essence enlightens you.
There were no sutras, either when Siddhartha was enlightened. However, what did they do concretely?
Bodhidharma developed a training method, called Bhagwan, namely, facing the world like a wall. It meant, stopping everything once, and wagering himself on it. Eating and cleaning, every aspect of daily life, is a challenging fight for the practitioner. However, the answer is never found in the sutras, even in his master's direction, but every single practitioner must respond with all one's heart and soul, by becoming one with the question.
It would be more difficult than reading sutras.
Zen training policy shocked high priests of the existing Chinese Buddhism, because, inheriting the privilege of the Indian Brahmins, they despised all works, even cleaning their own rooms. In addition, their temples expanded their private matters, and became independent armed forces, with many peasants evading taxes and conscription. In 574, the northern Zhou dynasty, which ruled the western half of China, banned Buddhism and confiscated temples. As a result, Buddhist priests and monks had to flee to the east.
With a lot of immigrant pages to serve them, monks of Chinese Buddhism would be a de facto aristocracy, as in European monasteries.
Lost their temples, Zen Buddhists too fled into the mountains of the south, each of them setting up a hermitage. From the beginning, they had no objection to agricultural and other hard work, and could maintain their training, without the support of the state or the people's tributes. However, Bodhidharma's Bhagwan was often misunderstood, as meditation facing a wall, and lazy fake Zen monks, Yehu, namely Confucians, appeared one after another, who misrepresented the enlightened, and did nothing, neither studying nor training. Therefore, Zen Buddhism needed inspection by authentic masters, and it began to form an exclusive lineage.
The Chinese introduced the stale Zhuxi family system, even in Buddhism.
Although Zhiyi was a monk of Nanjing, the capital city of the southern half of China, where Buddhism had flourished since Emperor Wu of Liang, he willingly retreated with his companions, to Mount Tiantai, 300 kilometers to the southeast. Although he studied the Lotus Sutra after monk Kumarajiva, he also explored the authentic meditation method of Buddhabhadra's Indian style. Therefore, thinking that, even the instant mind in everyday life, reflects the whole world of eternity, as described in the Garland Sutra, he sought Dunwu, sudden enlightenment, without an intermediate process, like Zen Buddhism. His comprehensive followers formed the Tiantai Lotus School.
The school was a university of Chinese Buddhism.
Yang Jian was a general of the northern Zhou dynasty, from a previous armed Buddhist temple. When he gained power, and established his Sui dynasty in 581, he restored the Buddhist temples, and leveraged their influence to his advantage. Thus, he reunited China. He established a new large Daxanshan temple of Esso Buddhism, in the capital city Chang'an, and built wooden Buddhist towers, in over 100 places across the country, as well.
He would seek to protect the nation, through the occult power of Esso Buddhism.
However, to prevent the political intervention of the ancient Zongzu and other Buddhists, he instituted the bureaucrat promotion system, the Confucian imperial examination. Following legalism and Confucianism, he managed people through statutes, ruling, criminal law, and administrative law. However, the Sui dynasty did not last long, due to conflicts with the northern Gir Turks.
He was modern politics, but no match for barbarians.
In 618, the Tang dynasty succeeded, and inherited the imperial examination and the management by Luling. There, worship of Vairochana, the symbol of the Dharma of the Galant school, was popular in the cities. Zen Buddhism also gathered many enthusiastic disciples, on the mountain in the middle of the Yangtze River, and formed the Dongshan school.
The stable dynasty shifted people's interest from the pessimistic Pure Landism to the national Garlandism. However, it is something strange that even Zen based on individual self-cultivation formed its faction.
On the other hand, monk Huanzang secretly left the country in 629, to study the Yogacara school, directly at the Nalanda Academy in India, and in 645, he returned with a large number of sutras, which he translated as the precious new versions. His followers formed the Farsi Yang school, to meditate on the Dharma, just as the original Yogacara school.
Although the old versions by Kumarajiva around 400 were easy to understand, they did not reflect the original sutras exactly.
The Dongshan school of Zen Buddhism swelled, and finally broke up in 675. Favored by Empress Wu Zetian, the northern school led by Shenxiu, a relative of the emperor, built a massive temple in the capital Chang'an, where it preached to people. Envied his talent, Huineng had to run away to the south, and founded his own temple in the mountains, 100 kilometers north of Guangzhou, as the Southern School. He respected the origins of Bodhidharma, and produced many unique disciples. Soon, they became independent hermits, examining each other and honing their studies. Thus, the 8th century was the heyday of Zen Buddhism.
Although the Northern School might succeed, it fell into national Buddhism.
However, politics took a turn. Eunuchs controlled the central politics, and bureaucrats dominated local governments. They willingly built various temples, donated generously, and expanded their manners, but for them, it was just a way to conceal their wealth and militia. When Tibet was ravaged by foreign Buddhist conflict, the nationalistic Taoist Emperor Wuzong banned Buddhism, confiscated 4,600 temples, and deprived the status of 400,000 monks, in 845.
European lords also built many monasteries to hide their wealth.
This led to the abolition of Zen temples of the Northern School too, but the independent monks of the Southern School had no temples from the beginning, and survived by farming themselves. After Wuzong's death, local bureaucrats became increasingly powerful, controlling the military and taxes, and exploiting their regions, which led to a series of large-scale peasant rebellions. Thus, the Tang dynasty came to an end in 907.
So, again in chaos.
In the 10th century, short dynasties took over one after another, and the provinces were piecemeal, for half a century. However, their weak rule allowed the people's economy and culture to develop. As well, the dynasties had to tolerate Buddhism. However, Buddhism shifted from studies by monks, to easy worship by ordinary people. Pure Landism required only chanting the name of Amitabha, Nianfo, whereas Zen Buddhism evolved into a form of meditation, known as Zazen.
I wonder whether they were still Buddhists or not.
Islam emerged in the Middle East, and quickly spread to even Central Asia. Against it, the Mongolian Khitans established the Liao dynasty in 916. To prevent it, the military Song dynasty eventually reunited China in 979. The dynasty promoted Confucian bureaucrats through the imperial examination, excluding hereditary aristocrats and local warlords. However, the bureaucrats were often low-minded, owning ample land and ruling local commerce with their tax exemption privileges, which formed a new aristocratic class, ShiDaifu.
Even when the new dynasty suppresses bad ones, another bad ones rise.
Nevertheless, the Song dynasty had to create new positions to suit the monetary economy, so the central bureaucrats exceeded 10,000. In addition, the civil servant ShiDaifu were incompetent against the northern barbarian Khitans, and they spent a tremendous money to appease them. Thus, the national finances were on the verge of collapse.
Bureaucracy always swells.
Wang Anshi observed ShiDaifu exploiting ordinary people in the countryside, and proposed reforms to the imperial court for 10 years. When the government could not collect enough taxes, the young new emperor, Shenzong, finally appointed him the prime minister in 1069. Based on the ancient Zhou system, he insisted on equal people without ShiDaifu. To make the country and its people wealthy, he would suppress the strong and support the weak, namely, eliminate local control by ShiDaifu, and revitalize independent peasants and merchants through the new laws.
He brought up Confucius' delusional ideal, the Zhou dynasty, again.
Wang Anshi included Mencius in the imperial examination, promoting many capable young people, and garnering their support for his reforms. However, they were too ambitious, so they overlent to ordinary people, leaving them conversely impoverished. Although Sima Guang was also critical of the exploitation by ShiDaifu, based on Zhenzi's De Sue, he expected them to be leaders in developing the countryside. The respectable ShiDaifu agreed with him, as the old law party, and resisted Wang's reform.
I hear Sima was once Wang's supporter. Wang should have listened to Sima's advice.
Amid the conflict between the new law party and the old law party, Zhou Tunyi was an inconspicuous bureaucrat in the middle of the Yangtze River. He studied Yi, and influenced by the Zhuxi-ism school of Taoism, wrote the concise illustration of Taiji. According to it, when the arc of the world Taiji moves, it makes Yang, and when it stops, Yin. The combination produces Wu Qis, water, fire, wood, metal, and mud.
So far, it wasn't all that new.
The mixture of yin-yang wuqis, solidified as masculine or feminine materials, and the combination produces everything forever. We human beings are the best products of reason, because we react with our own moral compass, judging right from wrong, and raise our own activity. A saint has the best of the best human news, and sets the fair norm of humanity and justice, so we should follow him, to get the power of heaven and the earth.
He derived ethics from metaphysics.
Brothers Cheng Hao and Cheng Yi learned under Zhou Dunyi. The elder Hao passed the imperial examination, but disliking the political conflict, he dared to take up local positions. Like Mencius, he understood Zhou's human reason, as the ability to sense the world, as his own pity and happiness. On the other hand, the younger Yi could not pass the exam, so he crept into Sima Guang's favor.
The elder brother was excellent, but the younger was not.
Emperor Shenzong died in 1085, and Sima ran the government, on behalf of the next emperor, Zhezong at 10 years. Chen Yi also became involved in politics, but he was too obstinate, and as a result, he was expelled. After that, he insisted, regardless of the exam, everyone could be rulers, through the respect for reason of yin-yang, and his private school became popular.
There would be so many who wanted to be politicians, even though they could not pass the exam.
When Emperor Zhezong began his direct reign in 1094, he reverted to the new law party, which exacerbated the conflict. The Tungusic Jin took control of the northern half of China in 1127, forcing the Song dynasty to relocate to the south. The Songs had no power to govern, but without taxes, the people's economy flourished, while ShiDaifu declined.
After all, it was better if they had no ShiDaifu.
Zhuxi was a fallen ShiDaifu in southern China, and attempted to restore the raison d'etre of ShiDaifu. Learning from Zhou Dunyi and the Cheng brothers, he thought that yin-yang and wuqis are in opposition to each other, as the reason and material dualism. The world should go along with the reason of yin-yang, but it does not, due to the disorder of wuqis. To prevent that, we have to tune the material in advance, to the fair norm without distortion.
Oh, isn't that different from Zhou Dunyi, who deduced the work is from yin-yang?
According to Zhuxi, the situation is the same with humans. As Mencius said, we humans have a reasonable good nature, humanity, in our minds, but when the disorder of wuqis interferes, desire leads our minds astray, as emotion. Therefore, we must always prepare our minds and bodies, to be in tune with the respect for natural reason.
That was similar to Zen-Buddhism.
Zhuxi found the way to respect, in 8 steps and 3 objects of the Desuet. The 8 steps are, observing, realizing, tuning, moderating, autonomizing, managing, governing, and world ruling. Thus, we should aim to demonstrate virtue, to reform people, and to keep the best. The point is respect for one's own inner natural humanity, regardless of social position or economic wealth. So, everyone can be a saint, by embodying the heavenly reason, and be a ruler, by influencing people, as their norm.
This part is Cheng Yi's adaptation.
He opposed Buddhism, Taoism, and the New Law Party, which emphasized nihilism, laissez-faire, and equal people. He regarded those as beasts' life, and again argued as human morality, by Hutong Sanwan Wuchang, master and servant, father and son, and husband and wife. And, humanity, justice, decorum, wisdom, and trust. Instead of the 5 classics, he respected the 4 books, Analects, Desuet, Zhongyang, and Mencius, and he popularized his own ideas, by the brand new woodblock printed commentary on them. The depressed ShiDaifu and the ambitious young, welcomed Zhuxi's Neo-Confucianism.
They would have hated ordinary people, who lived freely under Wei government.
A capable bureaucrat, Lu Zhuyuan, criticized Zhuxi, for dividing the mind into reason and emotion. Influenced by Indian Madhyamaka Buddhism, and following Cheng Hao, he advocated mind study, which posits that, the mind should reflect the world, through the same reason, stating, mind is reason. Zhuxi regarded reason, as an eternally fixed rule, while Lu thought, reason constantly changes dynamically, as Taiji before any name.
The difference between Zhu and Lu is derived from the one between the Cheng brothers. Zhu followed the younger Yi, while Lu was based on the elder Hao.
Although Lu and Zhu met in 1175, the two could not understand each other. In addition, some followers of Zhu arrogantly believed, they were guided by the logic of heaven, and criticized politics and society. Therefore, Zhuxi-ism was banned in 1195. Nevertheless, it attracted more people. Venetian Niccolò Polo was an active merchant of Constantinople, in the Roman Latin Empire, that had conquered the Byzantines. However, the Latin Empire had been subject to the Mongol Empire, since the Mongolians invaded Poland in 1240. Sensing a new danger, Niccolò closed his shop, and left the city in 1260. As expected, the Latin Empire was soon destroyed by the remaining Byzantines.
In the first place, it was unusual that the Latin Empire occupied Byzantium.
Niccolò aimed east, to the Mongolians' capital Sarai on the Volga, but due to their civil war, he had to travel further to Bokhara, a Silk Road city in Central Asia. At that time, Genghis' grandson, Kublai Khan, established his own empire, the Yuan, at the former Tunguska that the Mongolians had destroyed in 1234. So, Niccolò visited him at Xanadu in the Far East, in 1266. Emperor Kublai welcomed Niccolò, and sent him back to Rome, as an official imperial envoy to the Pope. This arrangement allowed Niccolò to return to Venice, via the Levant, easily.
At that time, the Mongolians fought against the Egyptian Mamluks. If he had been a little later, he wouldn't have been able to go home.
Yeah, the enlightened Pope Clement IV cooperated with the Mongols, but the Christian Antioch Tripoli was conversely defeated, and destroyed by the Mamluks in 1268. The Pope also died in the same year, but the next Pope was difficult to decide. Finally in 1271, getting the response of the new Pope, Niccolò and his son Marco Polo, started for Emperor Kublai, with a gift in return. They traveled along the inland Silk Road, and arrived at the Yuan Empire's new capital, Beijing, in 1275. It had conquered even the vast China.
It took years, but Niccolò managed to complete his mission. Emperor Kublai would have been very pleased about that.
The emperor was particularly fond of Marco's talents, and not only did he learn about Europe from Marco, but also appointed Marco as a diplomat, and had him interact with India and Southeast Asia, for 17 years. Niccolò and Marco wanted to leave, but the emperor was reluctant to allow it. It was 1295, when they could at last return to Venice. However, Venice was at war with Genoa, and Marco was also captured. In prison, he wrote about his experiences and information on the East, even the Golden Land Zipangu, in the Travels, but few believed it.
The Europeans had lost the Levant in 1291, so the Far East was now just a dream.
The Yuan dynasty governed China, with the Central Asians. They believed in Tibetan Buddhism, and Islam was also introduced. Under foreign rule, the aristocratic ShiDaifu were depressed, while the economy and culture of the ordinary Chinese flourished, and Confucianism, which unified Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, gained popularity. However, as the Mongolians absorbed Chinese culture, they reinstated the imperial examination based on Zhuxi-ism in 1313, to promote capable individuals, who did not belong to the nationalistic Buddhists, Taoists, and ShiDaifu. Thus, Zhuxi-ism was recognized as one of the national religions, and the mainstream of Confucianism.
Zhuxi-ism, which argued the raison d'etre of ShiDaifu, was ironically adopted to suppress them.
However, even though the bureaucrats passed the imperial examination were capable, the Mongolians often had inheritance disputes, and the Central Asians have always been prone to corruption. Additionally, the plague also affected the Yuans. The Pure Landist White Lotusism followers adopted the cavalry tactics of the Mongolians, and initiated the Red Turban Rebellion, in 1351. Zhu Yuanzhang established the Ming dynasty in South China, and defeated the northern Yuans. But he was from a poor peasant, and extremely narrow-minded and suspicious. Although he protected small farmers and merchants, he carried out a massive purge of his old companions and the authentic bureaucrats, and employed many poor, through the Zhuxi-ism imperial examination.
He was rather a revolutionary dictator.
The next emperor, Yangming, was similar. He secured the position by force, and practiced authoritarian politics, employing abusive purges. On the other hand, he expanded the territories into Manchuria, Tibet, and Southeast Asia, led the Mongolian expedition, and explored the Indian Ocean. As well, he devoted himself to cultural endeavors, compiling an encyclopedia and a comprehensive collection of classical commentaries. However, the successive emperors also distrusted neither ministers nor bureaucrats. Instead, Those who were close to the emperors, namely, empresses, eunuchs, and Taoshis, ran rampant, which ultimately weakened the dynasty.
The culmination is a sign of the end.
YangMing was a top-class bureaucrat, general, and scholar. As he studied Zhuxi-ism, he believed, he found Zhu's later view. According to that, everything in the world follows the reason of yin-yang. Therefore, the world is also naturally good, and designed to go well. As Mencius said, the human mind is naturally good, and knows all, as humanity. Humanity is the nervous of the world. So, if it does not work well, the problem is rather in our humanity. So, Wang said, mind is logic.
As long as the world was produced along reason, as Zhou said, it has no room for disorder from the beginning.
We should perceive the world as if it were our own, and share in the joys and sorrows of people. It is the fair position of the mind. Nevertheless, if there is a disorder in the world, it is produced by the laziness of humans, who know but do not do. Therefore, Wang interpreted the 8 steps as correcting things, and doing what one knows, as unification of knowing and doing. The 3 objects are also regarded as awareness of virtue, familiarity of people, and maintenance of good. Thus, he asked his followers not to study speculatively, but to do on-the-job training.
He was hard on himself.
The orthodox Zhuxiists found that Wang's interpretation was rather close to Zhu's opponent, Lu Zhuyuan, so they criticized Wang as a heretic. However, as long as Wang was based on Mencius, Wang's claims were more legitimate. Thus, Wang's Yangmingism became independent of Zhuxi-ism, and attracted serious bureaucrats, who, as noblesse oblige, considered people's happiness.
Zhuxi-ism was bound by formal norms, so cold and arrogant.